My name's Steve Lewin. I'm the new director of the Wits Business School, and on behalf of the Business School, I'd like to welcome you here this morning to what's going to be an amazing address, a set of presentations by a very esteemed panel around the subject of Davos and the World Economic Forum. Firstly, I'd like to introduce the Executive Mayor of the City of Johannesburg, the Honourable Parks Tau. Morning. The facilitator of the discussion is also our Executive in Residence, Mr. Euvin Naidoo. The Chairperson of the Industrial Development Corporation, Ms. Montla Shlashla, and the Vice President of CMA Investment Holdings, Sid Wahi. For me, one of the gratifying points of Davos was the diversity of delegates that extended beyond the normal culprits of big business and government, to include people from NGOs and civil society. And accordingly, there was also an increased presence of African delegates. But I still think that there is room for further increase of the African delegates at Davos and having the African voice there. As with the female voice, I think we can do a lot more in getting more female representation. We want to provide a very strong link between business, government, civil society, and the academic community. And I think that Wits is very well placed for this. And I think as we go forward, so we want to extend very clearly our influence into Africa and partner with educational institutions across Africa. So we are therefore very honored to be hosting this event, especially when at a time when South Africa is celebrating 20 years of democracy and has proven to be one of the major emerging countries in the world.
So why are we here? You know, one of the big elements, as the head of school mentioned, is that Wits is really committed to this issue of sculpting global leaders. And part of it is to break down the barrier between business and society, and particularly across the sectors. And so the World Economic Forum has always been an interesting event. There's this item that we all see on television of leaders gathering to discuss issues and solve pressing problems of society. Right? And so from the outside, there's a perception of what goes on in these gatherings. And we try to get arguably some of the most connected people to bring to this event so that students, our guests, our colleagues can firsthand engage, and secondly unpack exactly what is the World Economic Forum and what are some of the lessons. So this is really about breaking down barriers. To kick off very briefly for about 2 or 3 minutes, I want to give you a background to this year's meeting. The big theme or the statement was the reshaping of the world, consequences for society, politics, and business. I think that's a very complicated way of saying things are really changing in the world, rapidly, right? And so how can you convene an ecosystem in which different stakeholders get a chance to contribute? With that, I want to start with you, Your Excellency. In terms of being the only African city invited, that's a great mantle, a great responsibility, and the only African city attending. I'd be very curious to you to open up to say, what were some of your learnings and insights coming out of the event, and what did you take away?
Local government is really where the rubber hits the road, literally, because it is in local government where spatial planning happens. So the way in which the city is configured and functions happens at the local level, and its efficiencies are going to determine the impact on and our ability to mitigate or adapt for climate change.
What were some of the key messages we were saying, and what were some of your takeaways in terms of, how are we doing in terms of our value proposition vis-a-vis others and the challenges?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I just want to say to everyone, because there are so many sessions in 1 hour, and they deal with so many issues. I'm a planner, I'm an urban planner. So I got to attend something on the design of cities. And in that discussion, which was a small room, it became very clear that one of the ways and the most powerful tool to resolve some of our socio-economic issues as South Africa and as African countries is in how we approach cities and urban design. she attended a number of forums related to the IMF, and she couldn't remember a single forum she sat in where anybody mentioned the name South Africa. Everybody spoke about Nigeria, about Kenya, about Ethiopia, about Rwanda, and we need to figure out as South Africans how we reinvent the South Africa brand so that it stays sticky, that it gets mentioned still everywhere. And you knew that everything you listened to in that room from all of the thought leaders about challenges to us, inclusive growth, deal with your deficits, FDI attracted, you are more difficult than if we moved into Kenya or Nigeria. And yet Nigeria, they will also say that there are massive issues that you've got to deal with, including security. You are so exposed in the World Economic Forum that even with a wonderful script, that shows very well that maybe for a change in our country, we've got the NDP that begins to give us one vision that we are all aligned to, and that can coordinate some of our policy actions to deal with industry and to deal with the economy. They were not enough. You needed to also have clear actions that shows that the entire economy, cities, business, government, all of us are actively involved in building this economy instead of just relying on the state.
If I had to sum up, and it resonates with what you witnessed, one or two single themes that stood out the most at this year's forum, it is the risk of the disparity between the haves and the have-nots growing. That was the fundamental theme of the direction that the world is going. I think that was one. The second was youth unemployment and the opportunities and also the challenges that it's going to face. And I want to turn to Sid Wahi, not because he is the most youthful on the panel regarding that, but your energy was quite palpable and inspirational at the event. I know you were part of, your holding company is part of the CNBC Africa theme. And you had literally key leaders pass through your hands as you hosted them on television. Love to get your insights, some of your highlights and takeaways to share.
One of the things that was very key for me was to see Africa on the agenda, on the WEF agenda, for 2 years in a row. At the regional conference in Abuja or in Addis Ababa or in Cape Town, which usually takes place in May, the focus is on Africa. But at Davos, it's at a world platform, and I think it was absolutely fantastic to see that for the first time there was actually dialogue and there was engagement. And as it was rightly said earlier, the Nigerian delegation was there in full force to announce the forum in Abuja for the first time. So there was a lot of what I'm borrowing this term, a lot of cautious optimism on Africa, and I think as Brand South Africa, as ambassadors of the African continent, rightly did, is they basically said Africa and South Africa are open for business, and despite the issues of political instability, inherent structural issues in the economy, the weak currency, whether it be the naira, the shilling, or the rand, Africa continues to thrive. And the IMF put out a report a few years ago saying that it's the third fastest growing region in the world. And I think with the lack of opportunities in the rest of the world, you're going to find that Africa needs to, or South Africa as the dominant player, needs to be more welcoming of FDI, more welcoming of our foreign counterparts to come here and set up businesses and create employment opportunities. Top 85 richest people in the world have the same cumulative wealth as the poorest half of the world, and I think that is a very, very scary statistic. And one of the other themes that came out of the conference was this thing about inclusive growth. And when you started the introduction of the panel, you talked about the Global Agenda Council. Every year they put out the top 10 trends to expect for the following year, and income disparity, the importance of megacities. Actually, everything that we're discussing at the moment are things that have are trends for 2014 and will ultimately determine the future of not just Africa but the world. And as media, one of the things that we are quite upset about the international media, the CNNs, the Skies, and the BBCs constantly portray Africa as a continent of doom and gloom. But just travel if you visit Nairobi or Lagos or Accra, or just look at our own backyard, Cape Town, Johannesburg. There's so much economic activity and there's so much opportunity in the continent today that I don't think they're doing justice to us.
If in fact the majority of learners do not gain access to higher education and or do not reach grade 12, how do we intervene at the level pre-grade 12 so that we're able to create appropriate opportunities for those people to be able to access the opportunity? So I think that unless we're able to focus on building the skills and therefore take advantage of the demographic dividend, we won't be able to grow.
The biggest takeaway has been in re-emphasizing what the role of government is, in such a way that government should make sure that it sets the right environment for business and entrepreneurship to prosper. And one of the main ways that was highlighted because of the advent of technology, to add to the issue of training, is just investment in broadband. That if governments focus just on making sure that available, world-class broadband is available for business, a lot would have been done for entrepreneurs.
Education and the internet are great equalizers. And you can't be competitive if you have a child sitting in, let's say, Soweto without access to a tablet and internet, and have a child sitting in North America with incredibly fast broadband internet, 3 or 4 multiple devices, access to information repositories. So the way that we start retaining information and learning as young people, as children, has changed, and it's no longer just about what you learn in the classroom and textbooks. But social media gives you a voice. Everybody with a Twitter account is essentially a publisher and a curator of information, and that is very powerful because a small message can gain enough critical mass and cause a revolution. And I may stand corrected on this, but we haven't really seen a major revolution on social media in Africa just yet. But I have a feeling that if the income disparity continues and something isn't done in the relatively short term, social media will allow large masses of people to mobilize and have their voices heard. If you just look at what's happening in Kyiv and the unrest over the last 24 hours and the violence in Ukraine, the world is changing rapidly and sometimes not always for the best.
We now have to start looking at which parts of the National Development Plan are being implemented and what the successes are, so that we can begin celebrating the successes on the basis of programs that are being implemented. Where we require improvements and continuous debate, let's do that, but let's continue with implementation and not go back to debate.
My point really is that the nature of technology means that it's always going to be a few steps ahead of regulation.
Just to add, I think you need agile and flexible governments and enterprises and institutions, because technology changes so fast that the policy environment is very slow, but technology moves very fast. And you need agility in the policy environment. And it's something that we're going to struggle with as South Africans, because we write policy for everything. For everything there is, we write a document, there's a policy, and to rewrite a policy needs a white paper, a green paper, and another paper before you do anything. By the time you arrive at a decision, it's like, let's look at 3G. The world is going to 5G, 6G, and we're still writing policy for 3G. Fact is, you need a lot more flexibility and agility in the policy environment.
South Africa is what you make of it. And your MBA and your degree is an opportunity for you to use to make a difference in life. I'm hoping that this inspires you to believe that in your workspace, because if you're taking an MBA and you've not noted that your work environment is MBA number 1, number 2 is the certificate, you're missing the point. Act wherever you are, in every square meter where you are. You can make a hell of a difference to begin to shape the way we think about ourselves. South Africa is what you carry in your head and what you live every day. So if you start acting, you're also moving us in the right direction.
And I think what this session today has done for us is to say, okay guys, here is a glimpse into a very powerful source of thought, leadership and current trends in the world going forward. What are you going to do about it?